My name is Henry Carter, and I'm an actor. And I became an actor because I think it might be genetic. I don't know. But my earliest memories are those of being taken by my mother to the movies and my wanting to be in the movie, in the screen, in the picture. And I remember looking back at the projection and wondering where it came from and so forth. And some of my earliest memories are movies like Duel in the Sun and Meet Me in St. Louis. And however, when I was 7 years old in the second grade at Franklin School in Hillsborough, Texas, my second grade teacher, Mrs. Faybird Ellison, who was the most wonderful teacher, the most wonderful woman in the world, cast me as George Washington in the play Betsy Ross and the Flag. And I remember being on stage and telling Betsy Ross the 13 stars and the stripes, 13 stripes. And when it was over, we left the stage and went down the steps, off stage left, and we went out into the auditorium and sat in our assigned seats, which was on the front row, which were on the front row. And I remember giving Mrs. Ellison back my white cotton wig, and the principal got up and said, "Let me see, who played George Washington?" And I said, "Oh, I did. And she said, "We enjoyed that so much." Well, there was no turning back. I knew right at that moment what I wanted to be. And to me, being an actor was normal. People growing up, "You want to be an actor? Well, you're crazy," that sort of thing. And to me, it was the normal thing. And I think also being a rather compulsive person, I'm very compulsive. I think that got in the way of my compulsive, the compulsive area of my mind, and I think it took off, and nothing could stop me. I was determined to be an actor. I was born in Hillsborough, Texas. When I was 8 years old, my family and I moved to Waco, Texas. And I grew up in Waco, Texas. I went to Waco High School, graduated from Waco High School. If you ever saw the musical Grease, it was just like that, exactly. Only we didn't have the huge sweeping musical numbers that you see in the musical. And I graduated from Waco High School and started to Baylor University. And of course, I enrolled in the theater department. Mr. Paul Baker was the director of the theater department at that time, and he was a very inspirational figure in my life. I think he had just as much influence on me as my father did. He was a wonderful human being, so knowledgeable, and all he had to do was walk into a room and you were inspired, even before he started talking. And I lived for his repertory acting classes. We studied, we worked on Greek tragedy, Roman comedy. We did medieval theater. I worked on Shakespeare. I worked on the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet for a little over a year. We worked on Restoration comedy and modern realism, and it was inspirational, and I learned so much from Mr. Baker. I also worked with Charles Lawton. Mr. Lawton came to help us with our production of Time in the River. And could I share an experience with you about that with Mr. Lawton? Mr. Lawton, as you know, was the Academy Award-winning actor for playing. He won the Oscar for doing The Private Life of Henry VIII, and he also was the original Captain Bligh in the original Mutiny on the Bounty with Clark Gable, and he came to work with us, and he was a tyrant. Everybody just couldn't. We were so astounded. And actresses would come off the rehearsal just sobbing. And the night of opening night, 30 minutes before curtain, he called us together and he said he started crying. Tears came into his eyes. And he said, "You have in you what I have in me, what I had in me to make me want to go onto the stage and we loved him. We just absolutely loved him. Another incident I had was this. I was playing a 14-year-old boy. I was 19, but I was still thin and skinny and small enough to play a 14-year-old boy whose voice was changing. And my line was, "What was the trouble?" And so I passed Mr. Lawton in the hall one day, and I said, "Mr. Lawton, could you tell me anything about my performance that you want to tell me?" That he said, "Yes, that catch in your voice. It's a gimmick. It's a gimmick. Get rid of it. It doesn't work." So at the next dress rehearsal, I didn't do it, and I passed Mr. Baker in the hall, Mr. Paul Baker, and he said, "Boy, why didn't you do the catch in your voice?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Lawton didn't like it," and he looked over his glasses and he said, "Oh," and went on. And it was wonderful working with him. And Elsa Lanchester, his wife, joined him. She had played the Bride of Frankenstein in the movies, and she joined us, and she was a wonderful character actress. And then after I graduated from Baylor, I went to the Dallas Theater Center, where I was a member of the repertory company for many years. I played Shakespeare, Pinter, Greek tragedy. We did so many varied things. And I was able to take what I learned in the acting classes at Baylor and put it into practice on the repertory stage. And that's when you learn. That's when you learn, when you do it. I taught Stanislavski acting there in the Professional Academy. And I also taught acting in the graduate school of Trinity University. I got my master's degree from Trinity University in theater. And I was able to teach an acting class that was located at the Dallas Theater Center in the Graduate School of Theater at Trinity University. The Trinity University Theater Department at that time was located at the Dallas Theater Center. And so I was there for many years and practiced my craft, and it was wonderful. And when I left the Dallas Theater Center, I went to California. I'd always been fascinated by the movies. And I went to California, and I was very dissatisfied with what I saw there. In Hollywood, they want you to take part of your personality and play that for every role you do. And then when it's over, you've had it. It's a roller coaster ride down, and you're a has-been. I'm a character actor. I play a different role with each play or movie that I do. And I couldn't see myself fitting into that. I thought about it, and I thought, no, and I auditioned at the Actors Studio, and foolishly I was accepted, and foolishly I came home. Maybe I should have stayed, I don't know. But anyway, I came home with the idea of establishing something in film here. I thought that, well, I knew that film was beginning to take place in Texas, and I wanted to be part of that. So one day I went into a friend of mine's store. He had a rock store. And I said, I would love to make a movie. He said, why don't you make one and put it on the computer? And I said, they can't do that. Technologically, that's not possible. He said, oh, yes, it is. So I made Landers Cottage, which is on my website now, and I had a website created for me, and I put Landers Cottage on the website. It's based on Edgar Allan Poe's Only Optimistic short story. And since that time, I've done many, many movies and put them on the computer, 30-minute dramas, and I play roles in them, and I put them on the computer. I have a body of work on the computer. My website is Henry Carter, actor, DTC.com. And the DTC stands for Dallas Theater Center. Henry Carter, actor, DTC.com. And I've been doing that, and I am continuing to do it. And I also do movies for other people. I've done several movies for Damon Crump and Jackalope Productions. Uh, um, I love working with Damon Crump. He's wonderful to work with. And some of the Baylor Film School people. I've done, let's see, I have done two that have not been edited yet. They will be soon. I did, well, one is already on the computer. It is The Tenor. It is The Tenor. The other one is The Great Cartoni, and I did another one called Shadows and Aliens, and it's wonderful working with these people. It's a creative joy. I don't want them to ever stop once we get started. But
Strangers and Aliens.
I beg your pardon. It's Strangers and Aliens. It's Strangers and Aliens. It was done several years ago, so I didn't remember it. And I did a movie with a Polish director named Kasia Plażenska called Bindings, and it's on my website now. And I just want to do this until I am physically unable to do it any longer, until I have a thrombosis or something. I don't know, a stroke. I won't be able to do it anymore. But anyway, but See Tenors, it's on the computer and it's finished and done. I'll say this about the difference between film and theater. I saw Betty Davis once on a talk show, and they asked her which she preferred, theater or film. And she said that she loved the theater passionately, but there was something mysterious about doing it for the camera that she loved even better. And I feel that way. I love the theater, but I like film just a bit better because you can relax into it, and it's, I don't know, it's just something I feel that I was meant to do. I think that's why I was put on this earth, quite frankly. The difference between film acting and theater acting is, of course, in the theater you use your complete instrument, your voice, your body. The sky is the limit because you have to project 50 feet. And when you do project 50 feet, you have to make it look real. With film acting, you have to tone that down and just think the thoughts of the character and feel the feelings of the character, and you have it. If you projected to the film camera, you would break the lens, as you do in the theater. You break the lens, but the difference is just pulling it down and just barely touching it. I think my favorite role over my entire life has been D'Artagnan in The Three Musketeers. I was crazy about D'Artagnan. I would love to have known him. Of course, he's a fictitious character, I know that. But D'Artagnan, I also liked doing Lucius in Julius Caesar. I liked doing Boris Kolenkov, the Russian, in You Can't Take It With You. And I love doing Chief Sitting Bull in Annie, Get Your Gun. I think those are my favorite roles. I couldn't pinpoint just one. I had to name several. But also, can I add something? When I was a child, my family and I moved from Hillsborough to Waco when I was 8 years old. And the next year, I enrolled at the Baylor Children's Theater when I was 9 years old. And a few weeks later, I was chosen to play Tiny Tim in A Christmas Carol. It was a television production. Oddly enough, at that time, it was not a theater production. Television was 3 years old at the time, and it was in its infancy. And most TV drama at that time was done live on the soundstage, and we rehearsed it for 3 weeks at the Baylor Theater. And my mother and father loaded a car full of props and costumes and actors. And in a caravan, we started out for Fort Worth, Texas. And we did it live. We set up live at WBAP in Fort Worth, live on the soundstage. And I had two lines. I remember them very well. Hurrah and God bless us, everyone. And I remember the camera moving into me on God bless us, everyone. And I think that was the most exciting moment of my life. I've never forgotten it. And of course, from that time on, there was no turning back. I've had several interesting experiences on film. I caught on fire once on stage. I was playing Lucius in Julius Caesar, and I came on with a torch, a live torch, and we were doing it. We were on tour. The Dallas Theater Center was on tour. We were doing it at the Globe Theater in Odessa, Texas, and the orchestra pit at the Globe. We were the second. I think we were the second production to be done there, and the orchestra pit had not yet been finished, and it was earthen floor. It was dirt. I had to come on through the audience with a torch, and when I did, I got almost to the steps onto the stage. The fluid from the torch ran down the torch to my wrist, and from the wrist out, I was a walking flame, and I didn't know what to do. And finally, I thought, well, I'll just throw the torch into the orchestra pit, and I did, and the earth would put it out. And I took my cape and wrapped it around my hand and put myself out, put the fire out. I could see the audience kind of shifting, like it might be a sort of a beginning of a panic. And I saw two nuns in the audience with the big habits, and they were shaking, not knowing what to do. I saw that out of the corner of my eye. And I went on. The scene had to go on, so I walked up the steps and did the scene. It was the last scene of Julius Caesar, the scene in which they talk about the death of Brutus. This was the noblest Roman of them all, he did, and so forth. And I didn't notice any pain at all. But at curtain call, when we took a bow at the curtain call, every time my heart would beat, I would feel the pain. And so when I got off stage, I ran to the stage door, opened the stage door, and let the light flow through, and I looked at my hand, and the fluid from the torch had protected my hand. It hurt, and it hurt for about a week or two, but I got over it. It was fine. And let me see, another interesting experience I had. I was doing Herbert Dean in The Royal Family, and the actor playing Oscar, I think it was, didn't come on cue. And so I think he had an upset stomach in the restroom, an emergency. And so the actors had to improvise. Well, I loved that. The other actors were nervous and twittery, but I knew my character. And that's the thing about improvisation. When something like that happens, if you know your character backwards and forwards in 3-dimension, up and down, you know what he'll do. And so I started talking about Terrific Toast. We were eating. It was an eating scene. And I loved it. And finally he came on, and we got back on the text and went on. But I don't think the audience knew it. I hope they didn't. I honestly can't think of another thing that happened. Oh, yes, I can. It was during a performance of Annie Get Your Gun. Some people decided to play a joke on me. I thought this was a very unprofessional thing to do, for them to do. I had a letter that I had to read to Annie Oakley, so they gave me the letter, and I opened it, and it had some, I've forgotten what it was, some outrageous R-rated something, and I didn't break. I held it, and I said, he ran off with Dolly, and or whatever the line was, and it spoiled their joke, and I thought that was an awful thing to do, And let me see. Oh yes, at one time during, I think it was Annie Get Your Gun, the lights at the beginning of Act Two didn't come on. And we waited, and the man in the light booth had been fired, and he was getting back at us. And this was not at the Dallas Theater Center. This was at another theater, and he was getting back at us, and so the director got on the phone and she said, "Listen, you little weasel," she said, "You send you turn the lights on, or I'm sending this big guy, David Ellis, up to beat you up." Well, the lights came on immediately. That was a very interesting experience, and we carried on. Well, Linda Heskett was and is the founder and director of the Waco Children's Theater. And of course, I'd been in children's theater since I was 9 years old. And I walked in one day and she was starting it. And I said, "Do you need help?" She said, "Yes." And I was drafted and, and away we went. And I've been with the Waco Children's Theater since that time. And I teach acting in the Waco Children's Theater. It's a 3-week, maybe 4-week workshop in the summertime. And we're getting ready to crank up next month. And then we do a Christmas production. And we've raised several generations of children. And it's so interesting to see them come back and visit with us. You don't recognize them. When you grow up, the bone structure in your face changes, and you don't recognize them. But it's so rewarding, yes. Well, when my family and I moved to Waco, Texas, we moved to one house for 2 years, and then my family bought a house. I was 10 years old, a house in Cameron Park. And I grew up in the woods of Cameron Park. And there were a lot of boys in the neighborhood who are today, pardon me, still my lifetime friends. And we had adventures all along the river. I know the Brazos River. My house was and is 2 blocks away from the Brazos River. And it's a house in the woods. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. And we would have adventures that would out-hardy the Hardy Boys. If you remember the Hardy Boys adventures, the boys' storybooks, we had many adventures. And I can't think. Oh, we had a clubhouse. We had a clubhouse called the Lindsay Hollow Boys Club. And we took a dog house, and it was built. We took the top off of it, and we put a floor on it. And what was under the floor was what we call the brig, the basement. And then on top of it, we built a room with a window and so forth, a roof. And down in the brig, we dug a hole under the wall and a long passageway. You could only crawl to get in it. And a big room out at the end. And we covered it with boards, lumber, and put dirt over it and planted grass and an air pipe for oxygen. And we had our club meetings there. And a boy whom we wouldn't let into the clubhouse for some silly reason burned it to the ground one night. And so after the ruins were cleared, we forgot about it. And about a year later, the people whose property that was on had some trees trimmed. And they brought a truck in, and of course the room was still under there, the cave was still under there, and the truck ran over the top of the cave, and of course it caved in, and they had to get a wrecker to come out and get the truck out of the cave. And whatever happened after that, I don't know. We scattered. We scattered after that. I grew up in the Waco movie theaters. The Waco, Texas movie theaters, when I was a child, were the Waco Theater, Waco Hippodrome, and that's what it is today. It's a stage theater. They bring in touring productions and that sort of thing. And next to it was the Rivoli, and down on the corner and around the corner was the Orpheum Theater, where I worked as a teenager. And then farther down was the Strand Theater, where the screen was behind you. You had to sit, and you turn around and sit and look back. You look at the screen right after you went in the door. And then farther down there was the Crystal and the Rex, which were old, I think, silent movie theaters. They were holdovers they had sound. I don't mean that, but they they went back that far. And then there was the Fox Theater on the square, the old Waco Square, which showed movies from Mexico, which I always thought were very interesting, and the Gem Theater. And later, farther up on Austin Avenue, there was the Imperial Theater. And I remember it had gold walls. And the same men who owned the Orpheum owned the Imperial Theater. And when I worked at the Orpheum, they would send me back and forth to work both theaters. And with my tuxedo and my flat top, I had arrived. And I looked at that job as being my first job in the theater. And I know the owners would look at me strangely. I'm sure they wondered why they had such a dedicated usher. But I was very dedicated to that job. And I did everything I could to do the best I could. Waco at that time had a fine arts theater. It showed foreign films, movies from overseas, on East Elm Street, and it had the atmosphere of a theater. It smelled like a theater. It was wonderful. And one day I went to see a movie. My father would drop me off every Sunday afternoon to see a matinee at the Coronet Theater, and it was. I think I was 12, 13, and 14. Pardon me. And one day, there was just one other person in the theater at that certain matinee, and the owner of the theater came down, and I saw him go down and tell the man something, and he left. And he came over to me, and he said, "We've decided to cancel the matinee today because there aren't enough people. It would cost us more to run the projector than it would that we took in at the box office. Could we take you home?" So I said yes. So we got in the car, and the projectionist, they closed the theater, and the projectionist was driving. The box office lady, who was the owner's wife, was in the center, and then the owner of the theater was on the side of the door, and I was in the back seat. Well, I thought that I was being taken home by, theater, and they were wonderful people. But I remember they let me out at my house, and I walked in the door, and my father said, "Well, what?" Jumped up and said, "What's the matter? Where have you been? Why are you home so early?" And I said, "I was driven home by real theater people." And I was. They were wonderful people to take me home. And I was very excited about that.
Great.
I felt like I had been driven home by the Oliviers or someone like that. When I was 14 years old, Tyrone Power, Ann Baxter, and Raymond Massey came here on tour with a play. It was called John Brown's Body. It was done at Waco Hall. And Tyrone Power had been my idol in the movies. And after the performance, I went backstage, climbed under the curtain, went backstage. And when he came out, he had on a hat that he pulled down, a blue-black beard. No matter how much he shaved, he couldn't hide that. And an overcoat, trench coat pulled up, and a briefcase. And I stepped out of the shadows, and I said, "Mr. Power, would you sign my autograph?" And he said yes. And so I had my program, and I reached for my pencil in my pocket, and it had fallen out. And I said, "Do you have a pencil?" And he said no, and swept on off. And but at least I got to talk to my idol, Tyrone Power. And I followed him out the stage door, and he got in the car with Ann Baxter and Raymond Massey were in the back seat, and he turned around, and Ann Baxter, you probably know Ann Baxter from the Ten Commandments. She played Nefertiri. She went straight from John Brown's Body into the Ten Commandments afterwards, and she played Yul Brynner's wife, the Pharaoh's wife, Nefertiri, in the Ten Commandments. And she was in the back seat, and she lit up a cigarette and went, "Oh." And he turned around, and she said something, and he laughed, and they drove off. I heard someone say, "What's the Roosevelt? Is it the best?" Meaning that was the hotel, the Roosevelt Hotel. And that's where they went, I suppose. Another interesting story, let me see. Burgess Meredith came to the Baylor Theater when I was still in junior high school, and he was the guest star for Hamlet, Mr. Baker's experimental production of Hamlet. And he had a house out on the old Lake Waco, where he rented for the duration of the run. And he went out water skiing one day before a performance and got too much sun and came in and got on stage as Hamlet and started giving lines from Henry IV, Part 1, and, different lines. And finally, he passed out. And several of I think the gravedigger, the actor James Bottom, who was playing the gravedigger, and some other actors picked him up and carried him off. And they were able to continue for the rest of the performance. It was an experimental production, and there were 3 Hamlets, the different psychological areas of Hamlet's mind. And the other Hamlets were able to finish the performance. But before they finished the performance, lightning struck the theater, and the lights went out. And they brought candles out and lamps, and like the old 19th century footlights, and they finished the performance. But that's one performance that was not blessed, and that was one performance that they finished in spite of everything. I think some of the performances I've seen in movies that have inspired me have been, I think it was an Irish movie I saw, Richard Harris in The Field. I thought that was a brilliant performance. And I think Maria Schell as Grushenka in The Brothers Karamazov. What a perfect, flawless actress. She was absolutely wonderful. Those are my favorites. And I also think that there are some signature roles that have been played by actors, and when other actors attempt to do them, they can't quite match up to the actor who originated them, the roles. And for example, Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, I don't think that could be improved on. King Mungoot in The King and I don't think that could be improved on. Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, and Blanche in Streetcar Named Desire, I don't think that those 2 performances could be improved on. And Funny Girl, Barbara Streisand as Fanny Bryce, I don't think that could be improved on. And I know they did A Streetcar Named Desire after the movie, after Marlon Brando did Stanley Kowalski on stage and screen, and the Lincoln Center did a production with, I think, Tallulah Bankhead once. And the review after the opening night performance was, quote, "This is one evening when Stanley Kowalski was overcome by his Blanche," unquote. I think some of my favorite roles have been Lucius in Julius Caesar, Ben in The Tiger, Murray Chisgall's The Tiger. I think Boris Kolenkov in You Can't Take It With You, Chief Sitting Bull in Annie Get Your Gun, and Jack Jerome in Broadway Bound, Neil Simon's Broadway Bound. The Jewish father who's guilty, runs away. He's the guilty Jewish father who runs away with another woman, and I love doing that role. And I think those are my favorites. I've done some one-man theater too, one-character theater. I did. I did Pierre Bezhukov in War and Peace. I took a section of War and Peace and did it from Pierre's point of view. I did Billy Rose, the Broadway producer, in Billy Rose in Bloom. I did King Henry II of England in A Day in the Life of Henry Plantagenet. And I did Juan Perón, the dictator of Argentina, in the rise of Colonel Juan Perón. And those are some favorite things I've done. I have a large body of work on the computer, movies of my own. I've done a lot of movies for the computer. My favorites are A Mad Booth and Calypso's Island. A Mad Booth is a one-man play that I did in the theater first. I did historical research, then wrote the play and did it. Worked on it for 3 months and did it. 4 months, I think. And then someone wanted to tape it, and I taped it. We taped it, and it's on the computer. Calypso's Island is about is a story about what happens to Odysseus after the dramatic action of the Odyssey is over. The Iliad is the first one. The Odyssey is its sequel by Homer, if you remember. And my movie is a sequel to the Odyssey. What happens to Odysseus after the Odyssey? And another one is Lander's Cottage, which was Edgar Allan Poe's only optimistic short story. And another one was, Peter's Confession, about Peter the Great. It's a movie about Peter the Great, who was so evil that he murdered his son, and he goes into the woods and confesses his sins. Peter the Great, the old Tsar of Russia. Another one was Swimming with Mark Antony, about the last days of Mark Antony. A lot of these were one-man films, one-man plays. A Mad Booth was a one-man play, definitely. And let me see, what else have I done? X-Ray of a Marriage. Let me see what else. And that's about it. The latest one is, I'm trying to think, pardon me. It's The Same Thing. It's about an Irish priest and a newspaper reporter. And those are just a few of the movies. There are more, but my favorites are Calypso's Island and A Mad Booth. I'm more satisfied with those movies than I am any of the others. A lot of actors and directors have problems if they direct and act in the same film or play. I've only directed in movies, directed my other actors and myself. I've never had a problem with that, really, because I direct in character. I stay in character when I'm behind the camera, and I don't have to get in and out of character. So the actors took direction from me when I was in character. That's how I solved that, and for me it worked. A number of years ago, I did a role in a movie that was filmed here on location. It was filmed in Waco, Texas. It was called Action USA, and it was done by Alan Stewart Productions, who had a production company here. He made films. He was located in Waco, Texas. And I heard about it. I've forgotten who told me about it. I think my girlfriend's sister told me about it. And I went down to audition, and the role that I was auditioning for was the role of, part of a Mexican-American illegal alien who was working in the field, and I had dialogue and so forth. And so I auditioned for it, and when I turned around to leave, I saw a real authentic Mexican-American man standing there waiting to audition, and I thought, well, he has the role. Rejection is part of the theater. You just have to learn to accept it. Very quickly, you learn to accept it. And so a day or two later, I called the Alan Stewart production office, and I asked the secretary. I said, has a decision been made about the Mexican-American role? And she said, yes, it's yours. And I said, mine? I said, I thought there was a real Mexican-American behind me who had that role, snapped up. And she said, no. She said, we have to have actors who can handle lines and know what they're doing. So anyway, his office was located in I think on the top floor of the Alico building. It's a skyscraper in downtown Waco, Texas. And I couldn't go up to that level because I have a vertigo problem. I hyperventilate and lose my equilibrium when I fall in the floor. So she was the secretary was kind enough to come down to the main floor, the ground level, the main floor, and she let me sign the contract on the ground level, and I was so thankful. But I know that also the day we started filming, one of the stuntmen drove us out to location outside the city. And I was in the front seat, and the stuntman was driving us out to the country. And I said, "Tell me something. What is it like to be a stuntman?" And he said, "Oh, it's wonderful." He said, "When you jump out of a building, you get this most wonderful rush. You just can't beat it." And I said, "Well, that's one rush I'll never have. I'm glad you have it because I'll never have it." And so when my scene was finished, my fiance and I went downtown to watch some more stunts being filmed, a man jumping out a building. And he jumped, and he landed on his back on top of a car, and the car exploded, and my fiance screamed, and I said, "No, don't do that. It'll be on the soundtrack." But they didn't say anything. When I was at the Dallas Theater Center, Mr. Paul Baker had me take some materials in a suitcase up to Miss Greer Garson's, I guess it's a condominium. She lived right across the street from the Dallas Theater Center, across the Turtle Creek and across Turtle Creek Boulevard. There was her condominium. And so I went to the top, took the elevator, went to the top, and the elevator door opened, and there was a hall with one door. And I rang the doorbell, and lo and behold, Miss Greer Garson, who won the Oscar for playing Mrs. Miniver, and she did Madame Curie and Eleanor Roosevelt in Sunrise at Campobello, Mrs. Parkington, and a lot of films, opened the door. And oddly enough, I put the suitcase in, and oddly enough, we found ourselves talking about me. She asked me what I was doing, and I said I was playing the tutor in Medea. And she said, "Well, I haven't found anything I want to do recently." And she said, so all of a sudden, I realized how high up I was. And I started hyperventilating, probably because of meeting Greer Garson. And also, I was so high up in the air. And so I walked over to the elevator and punched, hoping the elevator would come. And I know she thought my departure was abrupt, but I couldn't help it. I did not want to pass out and fall on the floor in front of Greer Garson, and I left. I've always wanted to tell her that. Of course, she's long gone now, but one of my earliest memories is that of being taken by my mother to a movie theater to see Greer Garson in a movie. She was my mother's favorite actress, and I got to meet her. Somehow her life came to me. My life didn't go to her, and I was really kind of overcome. And oddly enough, she was involved in one of my first memories. One of my first memories is being in a movie theater, and all I remember of it was this: someone pulled a branch of white lilacs, or whatever the flower was, down and let go, and that's all I remember. A few decades later, I rented the movie, pardon me, Random Harvest, and there was that scene. My earliest memory, I saw it on television, and Greer Garson was involved. But I've always wanted to tell her, to write her or see her at the theater center, that, why I had such a hasty departure at her front door, way up in the air. Something else Greer Garson did that was very, very wonderful. The first year the Dallas Theater Center opened, the drama critic John Rosenfield, was against the theater's concept of theater. And he roasted us. I wasn't there yet, but he roasted the Dallas Theater Center. And a few days later, Miss Greer Garson came across the street and talked to the entire company about criticism and how to take it. And the fact that most drama critics are probably brilliant journalists, but they've been put in a foreign field and they don't know as much about it as the actor. So that was wonderful of her. It was a beautiful, compassionate gesture of her. She didn't have to do that, but she did. And she was a wonderful human being as well as a brilliant actress. I was present at the grand opening of the Dallas Theater Center. I was a student, an undergraduate theater student, pardon me, still at Baylor. And I went up during the 2 weeks I had for my Christmas vacation, and I devoted my entire Christmas vacation to helping build scenery and get the theater ready for the grand opening performance. And I did. And we had done, the opening play was Of Time and the River. And we had done Of Time and the River, or we did Of Time and the River the year previously, and I had played the boy whose voice was changing. And Mr. Baker let me play my old role on New Year's Eve for one performance. And I had a quick rehearsal, and I did it. It was New Year's Eve, and I will mention the fact that it was Christmas Eve of 1959. And I did it, and after the performance, I put my costume in a box and walked across the railroad tracks and back across the LBJ freeway. It was New Year's Eve, and it began to snow, and the bells were ringing. And I thought, well, I'm now a professional actor, a real actor. I have acted, given a performance in a real repertory company. And I walked back to my grandmother's. And the next day I caught the bus and went downtown and saw Ben-Hur when it was new on the wall-to-wall screen. Took the bus back to my grandmother's house and then took the bus home and went back to Baylor. Later, of course, I went to the Dallas Theater Center. And it was a wonderful place to get experience and one thing I've always found about acting, I'm a passionate actor. I have to do it. It's passionate with me. I can't think of what I would do without acting. To play another person, to pretend, to me is a thrill. And I think it works for me. It's always worked for me best. It's always worked for me best when I give. And I've seen actors who like to take and have a claim and that sort of thing. It doesn't. When I do that, it doesn't work as well as it does as when I give. Acting is giving. And when someone comes up to you on the street or after a performance and says, "Oh, I enjoyed that so much," it means so much to me, so very much. One of the movies I did for someone else was a movie called The Great Cartoni. And it was, I worked with Brian Elliott and Damon Crump on the movie. And I played the role of a has-been, faded, retiring magician. And when I work on a role, I always try to get first impressions at first. And when I create a role, I study the script backwards and forwards and get everything I can from the script. And then I do the first impressions. And then I do a biography. I take the character's life and I create one incident per year that's happened to him from the time of birth until the film or the play takes place. And when I finish that process, I know the character. Not only do I know the character, I know why he does what he does. And then I start working on the inside of the character. I start working with the lines, the dialogue, thinking and feeling, just thinking and feeling. That's what actors have to do, think the thoughts of the character and the feelings of the character. But you use your own emotions, your own thoughts, and your own feelings. And then I do work on the outside of the character's voice and body. And I put the inner, that's the inner and the outer. I put the inner and the outer, and I blend the inner and the outer into one piece of work. And one thing about the emotional part, the inner part, you have to use your own emotions. For example, you might be talking about someone and you remember a beautiful, you might be called on to have some kind of feeling about it, but you can't get there. So you use a memory of your own, like a beautiful day at the beach, and you're talking about this, and I might be talking about a movie, but I'm thinking about that beautiful day at the beach that I'll never forget, and it comes to life. That's what actors have to do. And we also have to listen to the other actors. So much of acting is listening. And you find something in what the other actor is saying that motivates you to say your next line. And you go back and forth and do that. And that's when scenes breathe. And you just have to know your character to do it. And in The Great Cartoni, I was playing the role of a broken down magician. And I had trouble finding the role. I couldn't figure out what would be best what the interpretation would be, how I should play it. And I was watching an old movie on TV one night. I passed by the TV, and an old John Barrymore movie was on. And it hit me, that's how Cartoni should be played. So in my biography, I made him an ex-Shakespearean actor who had become a magician to make a living, and it seemed to come. I haven't seen any of the footage yet, but because it's still in the post-production, but it felt good. It felt like it came together. The movie I did for Damon Crump, one of the movies, The Great Cartoni, involves a magician. I play a magician, and he's a faded magician who is going to retire. And he had an abusive, the movie shows his abusive childhood. I'm played by a child actor. And he grows up, and he was given by this stranger the gift of magic when he was a child. And he's always had this gift of magic. And when he reaches the time of his life, when he when he's about to retire, he uses the magic to transform himself into a younger person. And I get in a coffin and put the mask on, get in the coffin, and then there's an explosion, and out comes another actor, a younger actor. I think Dad, a younger actor. And so anyway, so I have at the end, I have a new life. I disappear forever and have a new life somewhere, and can pass my gift of magic on to someone else. I would like to mention some other actors I admire tremendously in the profession. I think Tom Hanks is a brilliant actor. I think he can do any role he's required to do. He's a character actor, and a brilliant character actor. Leonardo DiCaprio is a wonderful actor. There are two other, and Sir Daniel Day-Lewis from England is wonderful. His performance as Lincoln is brilliant. An English Shakespearean actor playing Abraham Lincoln without a trace of an English accent was an astounding achievement. And of course, he got one of his Oscars for that performance. Two other actors I would like to mention are Ed Harris and Gary Sinise. These two actors, don't have to live in New York or Los Angeles to act. I think I'm right about this. Correct me if I'm wrong. But based on what I've heard, these two actors I think they're based in Chicago. And they are kind of away from the commercial system. And when a role comes along in a movie that they like and love, they do it. Gary Sinise is the actor, the brilliant actor. He is a brilliant actor. And he's the actor who did his one-man play, Give 'Em Hell, Harry. He played Harry Truman, and it was absolutely astounding. And he also played the amputee in Forrest Gump with Tom Hanks. And Ed Harris does some wonderful, beautiful work. And he does a role once in a while when he finds a role that he loves. He does it. And I would like to think that perhaps what I do is what other actors might find that they can do too. That is, going where you want to go, or going where you want to live, and finding your resources, and doing a short film, create a website, and put your movies, your work on video, and do it, and away from the commercial system. I know. Now, someone asked me a while ago what my legacy would be, what I would want my legacy to be. Here's what I guess was how I would like to be remembered. I would like to be remembered for my movies. I would like to give something to people through my work, through my movies. And my movies, I think, as I understand it, on YouTube, can go on into infinity, long after I'm gone. And I hope that someday someone looks at my movies and finds something inspirational, finds something positive, something to show the joy of life. You know, life is a wonderful gift, and we need to make use of every possible happy, good moment in it. There are ups and downs, yes. I lost my mother and my fiancée several months apart. I had a double whammy, but you find the strength to go on. You have to go on, and I just hope my movies give something that contributes to the human race some way, and I know that. I hope that my movies will be looked at in that manner, and people will get something from them. I think the one that comes closest to that is the movie The Same Thing. That's the title of the movie, The Same Thing. It's about an Irish priest and a newspaper reporter, and I think that comes closest to what I just mentioned. So anyway, watch my movies, and hopefully I will have given you something. If I have, I think I've fulfilled my purpose in life. Thank you.